All right, so we're now recording. Welcome again, everyone, to this community call on ORCID, DOIs, and data management plans. My name is Sheila Rabin. I am the program leader for persistent identifier communities at Lyrasis. And so that includes our ORCID US community and our Lyrasis DataCite US community. And so we're just really happy to have everybody here on the call. We have wonderful guest speakers, Liz Krznarich from DataCite, Maria Praetzellis from California Digital Library and DMP Tool, and Nina Exner from Virginia Commonwealth University. So we'll hear from all of our guest speakers in just a minute. I'm gonna get us started with just kind of an intro. What we're gonna cover today, basically, we're going to cover the fact that data management plans can now be specifically included in individuals' ORCID records as a work item. So that's a new development. We'll also talk about the fact that you can now assign DOIs specifically to data management plans through DataCite. And we'll hear about the DMP tool and support for ORCID and DOIs in the DMP tool. We'll talk about machine actionable data management plans and also touch on educating researchers about ORCID, DOIs, and data management plans. And we're planning to have time for discussion and questions towards the end. So each of our guests are going to speak a little bit today. And then at the end, we'll kind of open it up for discussion, but feel free to paste things into the chat as we're going as well. So I'll start us off just with this new development around ORCID and data management plans. This is a pretty straightforward, really. Anybody who's going into their ORCID record, you can now add a work and have it labeled specifically as a data management plan. So to do that, if you're manually entering work information into ORCID, you would just choose the work category of other, and then you'll see that in the work type section, data management plan is now specifically a label that you can put on this work now. So before that was not an option, now it is. So it's kind of a small change, but exciting that those data management plans can now be specifically indicated as such as an ORCID work. And also just to kind of segue into the DOIs and data management plan topic, within, if you're adding a work manually to an ORCID record, of course, there's already been a place to add an identifier for that work. Now that we can officially assign DOIs specifically to data management plans, that will come in handy even more so now. And I'll just put a quick little side note that ORCID has added an option to include an identifier that indicates what this work was.
Oh, you're muted again, Sheila.
How did that happen? God, so sorry. I need to just not touch the space bar. I think that's what's going on. So basically, if most data management plans are like related to funding a grant, so you can also include a funding identifier within the work to indicate what that work or data management plan was funded by. So that's pretty straightforward in terms of the ORCID side, and you can now have data management plans specifically indicated within ORCID in the work section. I think with that, I'm going to pass it over to Liz next to talk more about the DOI aspect, because that also plays into ORCID works a little bit too. So Liz, I will let you go ahead and share your screen.
All right, thank you, Sheila. So yeah, as Sheila mentioned, I'm Liz Krznarich. I'm the adoption manager at DataCite and also for the ROAR initiative. And with our latest metadata schema release, which happened back in March of this year, DataCite now supports registering DOIs for data management plans. A little bit of background, this came out of the work of the RDA machine actionable data management plans working group, because if we want to have machine actionable data management plans, everybody thought, yeah, it's a good idea. We should be able to have persistent identifiers for those as well and ensure that the metadata for those persistent identifiers aligns with the data model for machine actionable data management plans. DMP ID in the form of a DOI is really just a regular DOI. The main difference that we added in the latest metadata schema is that there's a new resource type to identify this DOI as a data management plan. And in our metadata working group, with an eye toward the future and developments that may happen in the future, the resource type used for data management plans is actually called output management plan. So again, supported since our schema version 4.4, the most recent schema. For those who are familiar with registering DOIs already and have seen our user interface, you can now select output management plan in our Fabrica user interface if you're creating DOIs manually. If you're creating DOIs through our API or through our file upload tool, this is an example of the XML resource type general equals output management plan. And hooray, you've been registered a DOI that identifies a data management plan. So it's great that we can have persistent identifiers specifically for data management plans, that we can make them findable in the long term so that those URLs always resolve. But the real magic and power of DOIs for data management plans is in the ability to make connections, kind of using that data management plan DOI as a touch point to relate out to other persistent identifiers. For example, those organization identifiers for funders and institutions, ORCID IDs for the researchers involved in the research project, and then other DOIs for related outputs, so the actual data sets that might result from that project or publications related. And those things can be captured in DataCite metadata. We'll not go through these examples in depth, but our metadata schema allows you to relate other DOIs through the related identifiers section, which is where you would put those data sets and publications. You can relate ORCID identifiers and institutional affiliations, ROR identifiers or other org identifiers for those in the creators and contributors metadata in a DOI. And then we also support funder information. So cross-ref funder IDs or ROR identifiers for the funders themselves, and then the awards as well. So we'll look at a quick example, which Maria will go into much more detail of a DOI for a data management plan that exists. And actually, because DataCite Commons was having some issues this morning, I kind of switched my example. But this is an example from CDL, from DMP Tool. This is what the data management plan looks like. But on the flip side, the DOI that's registered for this data management plan, we can see is really, really rich with this relationship metadata. We have ROR IDs for organizations, we have ORCID identifiers, and further down we can see we have identifiers for funders and also for those related related DOIs for other items. When we have those things in a metadata record, we can then take a look at the relationships in that data. And at DataCite, we have a couple of different tools that can be used for doing this. So we have a a relatively new search service called DataCite Commons, which is built on top of something called the PID graph, which is kind of a meta search of multiple different persistent identifier systems. So pulling together data from DataCite, Crossref, ROR, ORCID, all into one place. So you can look at the connections between a single DOI or a single ROR identifier and other persistent identifiers. So this is the DataCite Commons record for this data management plan. And we can see that it's got these relationships to people. And if we click over to those, we can see some ORCID information and other works information about this person. Similarly, we can look at the funding organizations and the affiliated organizations and see information about those organizations, as well as all of the other things that the other resources that are related. We can see the publications and data sets that are related to this DMP in DataCite Commons as well. So that's one tool we have with a user interface. The underlying data store, the GraphQL PID graph has an API as well that for developers and other folks who are interested, you can build visualizations and get data from there and do all sorts of interesting things with. We have some Jupyter notebooks with kind of pre-baked examples. So this is some Python code that generates a visualization of the connections between this particular data management plan, which is the dot right here in the center. The connections it has to people, funders, publications, data sets, and organizations. I have some resources. They are mostly listed in that notes document. We have some support guides that we've just released that are specifically for registering DMP DOIs. So take a look at those if you're interested. And with that, I will hand it over to Maria next, because DMP Tool is really the organization that's been taking the lead on registering DOIs for data management plans. We have about 123, I think, registered in DataCite right now. And Maria will tell you more about the work that they have been doing.
Awesome. Thanks, Liz. Let me just go ahead and share my slides. All righty. All right. Oops. Okay, so I'm with the DMP tool. I think most folks probably know, but just in case, we're a web-based platform for the creation of data management plans. It's free to use for anyone. You don't have to be a member, although we do have over 300 participating institutions. Primarily, we're based in the US. We do have users around the world. We also work from an open source code base. So everything that I talk about today, all of our work creating machine actionable DMPs, all of our work using PIDs and the PID graph goes into this open source code base that's actually used by a lot of other DMP platforms around the world. Our primary partners are in the UK, DMP Online, but there are other implementations of the code base in France, in South Africa, in South America, really all over. So what we're talking about really is much bigger than just DMP Tool. So just kind of taking a slight step back about machine actionable DMPs, I think it's important to think about why are we building these systems? And really our fundamental goal is to support the creation and stewardship of fair data. So a machine actionable DMP allows all of the rich information, all the rich metadata in a DMP to be shared automatically, machine to machine, across stakeholders. So this should facilitate things like notifications, verification, real-time reporting, automated compliance for funders. And one thing that I think is important to keep in mind, and I really try and keep front in my mind is that machine actionable DMPs really should lessen administrative burden on researchers. This should not be a system that is more work for them. This should be a system that is less work. So we're really using PIDs and this PID graph that Liz was talking about a little bit, so that we can create a system where DMPs evolve and change over time as a project progresses. So it shouldn't be something that researchers have to go in and update. If they're using related identifiers and we have a system that's working and functioning, it should happen automatically. There's a lot of work coming to that. I am not suggesting we're there yet, but that is our ultimate kind of goal in this work. So two kind of primary works that were really important in getting us where we are today. Liz mentioned the RDA Common Standard. This is a working group out of RDA. And really this working group was the ones that came together and thought about, how do we transform this narrative document that researchers have to make for grants? How do we transform that into a structured file with structured information that can be shared machine to machine? And this was really important because without it, none of what we're talking about would be possible. It was just a narrative document, no structure, no order, certainly no PIDs. So that was really step one. It was a community-based work initiative. International people from all over the world came together and tried to come up with a common standard for this. So we definitely owe that working group a big debt of gratitude. Another piece of work that I wanted to draw people's attention to is a report that California Digital Library worked on with ARL, the American Association of American Universities, AAU, and the Association of Public and Land Grant Universities, APLU. So we had an NSF grant, which brought together, I think there was about 50 folks who are very involved in research data management. And we came together and we talked about the current state of persistent identifiers for data sets, and we talked about machine readable data management plans. And this conversation was really important and kind of came about because of an NSF Dear Colleague letter, which said that researchers should be doing these practices. So really promoting these good practices and talking about how can we push the community forward to implement the recommendations of NSF. So we produced a report. It's short, it's only about 10 pages. It's really focused around action-oriented things that folks can do to promote these good data practices in their communities. So there's a lot in there about PIDs and machine actionable DMPs. And so I just wanted to point out this work that we're talking about was all funded through an NSF Eager grant that CDL got a few years back. And that grant really took us from work with RDA on the common standard, creating structured DMPs, all the way to where we are now, which is really working with PIDs and the PID graph. And so now that we have this structured document, it's about creating a networked environment where we can have a DMP that is updated over time. So this work continues. We're by no means done, but we are definitely much more advanced than we were when we first started this work. So moving towards the networked DMP. So like Liz was saying, generating a DMP ID was also a really big milestone for the creation of truly machine actionable data management plans. So our work with DataCite on this grant was fundamental. It was really fundamentally important that DataCite have support for creating data management plans and giving them DMP IDs. So that was a big milestone for us to be able to offer that. And so that really the idea being through the use of a DMP ID, through the use of all those identifiers within a DMP, we could make those connections that Liz was showing, and I'll show you a few more as well. So within the DMP tool, one of the big things that we had to do was basically PIDify the DMP. So what that means is putting in PIDs wherever it made sense. And this is an ongoing work. I am always looking for more PIDs. I'm on a PID hunt, so let me know if you think of any. So we have the DMP ID that Liz was talking about. We've put in RORs. We have the funder registry IDs, ORCIDs, of course. And ORCIDs actually are mandatory if you're going to get a DMP ID. And that was because we really felt like in order for a DMP ID to work, in order for this system to work, you need an ORCID and you need a ROR. It's just, you can't really make a connection if you don't have those two. So we decided to make it mandatory, and no one's yelled at me yet. So, and we have the re3 data for data research data repositories. We're using controlled vocabulary for licenses, and we just added, I think it's going to be released on Thursday, support for the RDA metadata standards directory. So people will be able to select from a controlled list of metadata standards. So I'm going to do a quick demo of the kind of 4 big things we added to the DMP tool. I'm not going to do a whole DMP tool demo, just really looking at, in terms of machine actionability, what are the new things we've added? What does it actually look like from a user perspective? I'll walk you through a few of those, and I'll show you specifically what integration we just did with ORCID, which I'm super excited about. Let's see if this will. Okay, so I've actually already started this DMP, so you don't have to watch me create it because it takes some time to actually put all that information. So I'm kind of cheating. So this is the screen that a user would see if they've selected a template in the DMP tool. In this case, this is an NSF template. This is an actual grant that we applied for recently. So just sort of project abstract, high level, project start and end. This funder, this is actually pulling from the funder registry. Collaborators, this is the tab where you would list all of the collaborators for a project. There's no limit to the number you can add. Obviously, these are ORCID IDs. The affiliations, these are RORs. The roles, we're using the credit taxonomy to define roles there. The right plan tab, this has not changed. I have kept it the same since I started. This is the narrative component of the data management plan. So funders don't want a JSON file. They don't want, not yet, maybe someday soon. They want a 2-page PDF file. So we still need to give them that. So a researcher can go in and put in the narrative component. We have put in all of the main questions or all of the questions that a funder will ask. And we provide guidance on the right to sort of give them some hints about what do they mean by some of these terms. So that's kind of what that column over there is. So research outputs, this is a new section for the DMP tool. So this is where we are asking structured questions using PIDs when we can, and using controlled vocabularies when it makes sense. So in this project, we've just got some software products that we're going to be releasing, but you can add an unlimited number of outputs. We're just using the DataCite type list here. Pretty straightforward information about the research output. And again, we're keeping it somewhat neutral because obviously it's not just data sets, right? Like we always think it's just data sets. People have many different types of outputs. So intended repositories, this is new, and this is pulling from the re3 data registry. So it's got every data repository out there. It's a very, very big registry. So people can apply as many registries for their outputs as they wish. And then a license picker as well. Then I'm going to skip over in the interest of time, and I'm going to jump to the last tab. This is where a user can actually generate a DMP ID. So we do have some parameters about when you can generate a DMP ID. You need to have mostly finished the DMP. It can't be empty. You have to have linked to your ORCID. And in the ORCID authentication, a user gives DMP tool permission to write to their record. And then once they have that information, when they register their plan, it adds it to their ORCID record. So I will show you that's kind of what Sheila was demonstrating in the beginning. And here is my ORCID record, and here is that data management plan listed as a work on my record. So it was super exciting to get this whole system kind of working, and it really just worked. It was great. Yay, API. So this is the actual, like Liz was showing you, this is the landing page for that project. All the high level metadata about the project that I entered into the DMP tool, citation information, description. Here are my planned outputs. One thing to note that is not included on this landing page is the full text narrative of the DMP. And that was just, I decided not to do that because people are not used to sharing that. And I didn't want to frighten people or, you know, discourage adoption. So if people want to make their DMP public, there will be a link here and it will actually say to see the full text of the plan up at the top right, you'll be able to click in and you'll see the full narrative. But for now, we're not including the full narrative. Maybe we'll change that in the future if people seem more comfortable, but for now it felt like a good place to kind of start. This bottom part, like Liz was talking about, other works associated with this research project. This is the cool part, in my opinion. This is where in time, as I get a DOI for my software, if I publish a data set, I publish an article, as long as I'm using related identifiers, we're able to associate it back with this data management plan, and it'll be listed here at the bottom. And I think I queued up. Yeah, so because my project hasn't officially started yet, I don't have any outputs to show you, but this is an old plan. So there are other works associated with this research project because it ended last year. So all of the articles associated with it are called all of the data sets as well. And that again is through the use of related identifiers, we're able to kind of make that connection. And obviously it also goes into the PID graph, into DataCite Commons, where you can do all sorts of great queries in aggregate, really showing the power of not just giving a DMP ID, but using identifiers within the DMP is really key to creating systems like the DataCite Commons, where you're able to do these really awesome queries and see all of the works that someone's published, all of the affiliations and that type of information. So that is my super quick demo and overview, and I will stop sharing and pass it to Nina.
Thank you, Maria. And I swear I had it up just a second ago. Do you hate that? That always happens. Like somehow you're looking at your slide deck and then it's not there as soon as you expect to talk. That is not the right one. I don't know where it went. Oh, I bet it's on another desktop. There it is. Ha ha. Mac, it lets you do everything, including shoot yourself in the foot about 20,000 different ways. Can everyone see my screen now?
Yeah, that
Okay.
looks good.
Thanks. So I'm going to go to the extreme opposite end of graphs and Jupyter notebooks and so on, and I'm going to talk about advocacy and outreach. I've been in the field for quite a long while, and ORCIDs have been a thing for a long time, and they've been the main identifier for people for a long time, and we still can't get everyone to use ORCIDs. So advocacy is and education is always going to be a part of getting things to work. Although big integrations a lot of times are the way that we get lots of people in, but there's always those early tails and those late tails. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Nina Exner. I'm at Virginia Commonwealth University Libraries. My pronouns are they or she, whichever you prefer, and he, I suppose, too, if you really prefer it. And I'm a data librarian, and I'm also a member of the DMP Tool editorial board. And I do lots of other weird stuff. So I'm going to greatly simplify what a PID and getting a PID is like, down to you figure out an object that needs a PID. Then usually that has a PID available, because there are probably lots of objects that need PIDs, but we don't have any PID types for them yet. Then you assign a PID and you make a record that just clearly describes the object that the PID goes with in the metadata. And then everywhere that you can, or at least everywhere that's appropriate, you reference the PID alongside with the human readable object description, wherever it should be referenced, which is usually more places than we really reference things, but all the computer systems and all of the articles and all the other places that we can, we try to stick the PID in along with the thing, the object of whatever kind. And you can imagine a citation for a digital article that has, in many styles at least, it has the name of the article and has the DOI of the article. That's like how it ought to work. In DMPs, that's still sort of growing a bit. And so things that we know when we're writing a DMP, hopefully, we hope we know it at least, is the people that are involved in the data collection, the research that's the DMP is planning, the employer those people work for, any existing data that is going into the data, such as maybe benchmarking data or comparative data that we've licensed to use it with. And the funding either that exists or maybe that's being applied for. If it's a DMP that goes with funding, I do a lot of funding related stuff. And so I usually assume that people do their DMPs for grants, although I know that there are a lot of DMPs that don't have grants attached. And those go with PIDs such as ORCIDs for the people. Hopefully we at least know the people. RORs, or maybe grids or ringolds or some other organizational identifier for the employer and possibly the granting organization. DOIs, if there is existing data coming in, so the DOIs of the incoming data, grant IDs, funder IDs if appropriate. And we write that up into a DMP. And we're usually manually doing it, even though we're doing it in DMP Tool. And we also talk about the things that we plan or anticipate having, like the funding that we're applying to, any research resources we might use, like specific cell lines or antibodies we're going to have created if you're in the medical area, or a fancy new wind tunnel that you're going to test things with if you're in engineering, I don't know. The data that'll be produced, publications that'll be produced, presentations that'll be produced. And those are all things we anticipate getting over the course of the project between when we do the plan and between when we get the outputs. So when we're thinking of those things though, ideally they would all be automated, but at the moment, most of that depends on manual tasks. We have to figure out who are the people on the team and we have to type it in somewhere. Sometimes lots of somewheres, although as Maria mentioned, it'll be less somewheres as we go. And that's always been the goal with ORCID is that we reach a point of write once and use many places. All of this is moving towards that same sort of goal. So why am I pointing that out? Most of you already know that it's a manual task. The manual is slow and error prone, so it's sort of always worth saying, and we're typing this over and over, and that's when all the errors come in and we mess everything up and the kids need to get off my lawn and come on, we just need to do it right. But in addition to that, the first reason is if you're new to the whole DMP world, which seems like a really impossible thing, except those of us who work in the health sciences in the US have only had to deal with a one-section DMP, so it really wasn't necessary to have a whole templating system for it until recently. And two, I assume some people came from the ORCID community and haven't worked with DMPs much. So the first reason is the simple version, if you take nothing else away about machine actionable or machine readable DMPs or output plans, is that they're a hub that kind of connects all the different PIDs, all the different integrations. And if we're ever going to change to more automation to really reduce that administrative burden, then we have to have machine readable DMPs or some kind of something that brings all of these things together. So we need PID graph, and we need this kind of system where once we put it in, we can then put it out as a cool visualization, or we can put it out as a long web page from the same information, or we can put it out as a PDF to the funder, or we can put it in our annual reports or whatever. And then the other reason is until fully automated workflows are really ubiquitous, we'll still need to advocate for user behaviors to change. So when we advocate for change, PIDs just aren't exciting most of the time. They're PIDs, identifiers, just no, people don't find them fun. I can't make them fun. I can make a lot of funny faces and maybe keep people awake, but I can't make PIDs but so much fun to most people. Except then there's always that one moment where some associate dean for research is like, really, if I could get all of my students to use their ORCIDs, then I could track all of their resources 5 years from now, all of their research products? Really, I could do that? Why did nobody tell me that? Well, probably someone has, but you just got it. So sometimes it does get exciting and people are all of a sudden really like, whoa, the library could do that for me. Wow. Someone actually solved this problem for me. But most of the time, PIDs are not exciting. So little bite-sized messages, little instructional tools for keeping the message going until that one time when suddenly they realize, oh, this is relevant to me. And identify lots of appropriate places. Maybe they turn out not to be appropriate places. They're just places I thought were going to be appropriate, but meh. You can talk to ADRs a whole lot of times, and sooner or later they'll hear, but they're really busy. Associate deans of research are really, really busy. For me, my bite-sized, I'm a librarian, so of course I have to have a guide. But I also have a slide, and I get a lot more use out of the slide than the guide, but people are like, is there some place that can repeat all of the things that you said to me? And that's what the guide is for. So I have one somewhat graphical slide to just be like, there are 6 PIDs. There's probably more than that, but these are the ones I thought that people really needed to know. And also probably 5 would have been okay, because grant ID and funder registry are kind of, you only need 1, but 6 looked better on the slide, so meh. 6 key PIDs that you should know when you're publishing research, and I try to just stick that in all kinds of random places. Appropriate places might be if you're a data trainer, anytime anyone's talking about fair data anything, because you can't be accessible, interoperable, and reusable if you haven't gotten it findable, and if you can't be findable if you're not using PIDs. Not 5 years from now or 10 years from now, or when the university has changed their website and all the URLs have stopped working. You need a PID to make that transition with you for your data. Anytime you're talking about rigor and reproducibility and transparency, which are all things that people don't necessarily like to hear about, but they come a lot up in grants again. Pull it out whenever people are like, why can't I just find all of the things that were published by my lab? Pull it out and say, well, you know, I know you didn't need to use an ORCID because your name's not John Smith or Joel Hernandez, but if everyone started using their ORCIDs, then they would be able to make PubMed able to really click and find the right person. So even the people who don't need it, because there's not 20,000 people with the same name, they need to use ORCIDs too, because that's how we make a better PubMed or whatever they're familiar with. You can see I talk to medical a lot. And then whenever you're talking to the grant people, the NSF DCL from 2019 is the Dear Colleague letter is a useful thing to trot out if you're at an ag and tech or any other non-NIH focused campus. Or if you're at an NIH focused campus, every time you're talking about the NIH data management and sharing plan policy, which you have until January of 2023 to convince all of your people they're going to have to follow, whether they like it or not. Okay, so how about you? How do you advocate for PIDs? I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, all of our presenters. Wonderful setup here for leaving some time for all of us to discuss. I think I had seen kind of a comment / question in the chat that came through about what researchers need to do when publishing to make sure those outputs show up on their data management plans. And I think, Maria, you were gonna speak to that, but also if anybody else has things they want to ask or add comments, put them in the chat, and then we, people can also unmute too as we go.
Yeah, so I wanted to address that in the discussion because it's such a good question. And it's really kind of the point in this work that we are at, right? So now that we've structured the DMP, we've got the DMP ID, we've added PIDs, we are at the part where we need to, I think it's really two-pronged. First, we need to encourage adoption and the use of the DMP ID and related identifiers, but also I think probably more importantly is we need to work with systems so that these connections can be made in the back end that don't require a whole lot of work from a researcher. So an example of an integration that we're working on with the DMP tool that facilitates this type of connection is an integration we're building with an electronic lab notebook called RSpace. So when a user is in RSpace, they deposit their output into a repository. That repository DOI gets pinged back to us so that we can record that deposit on the DMP. So that is kind of the first integration that we're doing to help facilitate those connections that happen without requiring a researcher to remember or to do it, because that's just not going to happen. So those kind of projects, I could talk more about it, but we have another grant funded project that's all about this piece of the work and making sure that we connect DMPs to eventual outputs. That's called the Fair Island Project. And the crux of that project really is that this piece of work, which is about making sure that we connect DMPs to the eventual outputs. So I don't know, Liz, if you want to add anything from the DataCite side about how that works.
Yeah, so in the bigger picture, DataCite side of things, the vehicle that's used to make connections between two DOIs or between a DOI and another persistent identifier is the related identifiers section of the metadata. Pasting the support link to the schema there. So we looked at related identifiers that were included in the metadata for a DMP, but those relationships can obviously go both ways. So an item with a DataCite DOI can refer to data management plan DOI, and that connection can be made using that relationship. Getting those relationships into, for example, a data set that will receive a DataCite DOI at this point is a little easier perhaps than on the publication side, where we're working with cross-ref DOIs for the most part, depending on the region. There are many generalist repositories at this point that allow researchers to specify related identifiers, and so the data management plan identifier can always go into those. Some of the IRs, depending on the platform, may or may not support related identifiers, but it's increasingly supported in repositories all over. Crossref is making some changes to its schema that will better support these kinds of relationships, although at the moment they really only support relationships in the citations list, which you could put a data management plan in a citations list. It's a rather blunt object that doesn't, it's not possible to describe what this thing is and how it's related to the publication.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I think like one of the main things as kind of a takeaway for what researchers actually need to know and do is like, first they have to know about what these persistent identifiers even are, and just if they're using an interface that prompts them to enter an identifier, to try to do that as much as possible, or it's just something to kind of keep track of with your other materials for the project or whatever, like that's what I would do at least. But of course, you all are
Yeah,
much more experts.
I think it's kind of a mix. I think this is really the area that we have the most to build, right? Now that we've kind of created the structure where this is possible, what my sort of focus now is to build integrations so that researchers don't have to really know what PIDs are. I think they have to know what an ORCID is. They have to know to use their ORCID, but I would like it if they didn't really need to know that much. Like in the DMP tool, you don't know that you just put in a ROR, right? Like then they don't need to know that. So what I'm trying to do is really build integrations that can kind of build these connections in the back end, so it can be seamless for a researcher, so that they might know conceptually, like I'm able to see everything that I've produced on my ORCID profile. But beyond that, like the intricacies of the PID graph, I mean, I would love it if, like Nina, I got someone really excited about it, but your average person, I just don't, I don't know if they need to really understand like the PID graph and like these kind of like larger connections. So I don't know what you think, Liz, but
I definitely agree that there shouldn't be an expectation of researchers to understand how things are working under the hood. However, if if somebody is approaching a repository system where they're depositing a data set, if the repository system asks what are related publications, or what's your related DMP, if those fields are available, fill them in. It will only help all of these systems to work better together.
Yes, totally agree.
And there's a lot of people on this call now in the audience that are good integration building team members that may be thinking right now, oh, hey, I was been waiting for some sort of central hub that would help clear this up, and might be able to dig in a bit to how PID graph is working and how the various integrations are working too. So
that is true. And I will say with the PID graph that we looked at, where that information comes from, those relationships, is two places: related identifiers in DataCite DOI metadata. On the Crossref, the publication side of things, there's a very rather complicated technology that underlies this called event data. We also use it on the DataCite side, but it's basically the way that Crossref pushes relationships out into the world between Crossref DOIs and other resources. We use it specifically for consuming data about relationships between different DOIs. It also tries to capture relationships between other URLs just out there on the web. We don't use that part of the information, but those DOI to DOI relationships come from event data.
Great. I'm seeing actually a few more questions in the chat. One for Maria specifically, which is, what is meant to be the long-term location of the DMP that has the DOI? Is it DMP Tool or an institutional repository, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, another great question. So we built the DMP Hub, which serves as, it serves the landing page for the DOI, and that is the long-term location for the actual identifier. Of course, it always is in DataCite comments, and get the DataCite page as well. So the DMP Hub is kind of our client that goes out and looks for updates to the DOI as well. That's the piece that we're building right now. So as articles are published or data sets, that kind of information all goes through the DMP Hub. So it's actually technically separate from the DMP tool. And it's really just kind of like a simple repository for all of that metadata and the DOI. And if you are more interested, you can definitely shoot me an email, and I can always put you in touch with a developer. It's all open source, so we tried to build this so if other people were interested in replicating it, they could set up their own instance.
Awesome. And there's another question, which is, you mentioned that, if somebody goes into DMP Tool, they authenticate their ORCID ID, and then their data management plan will get written to their ORCID work for them, will it also get added to any of the like collaborators' ORCID records? Or, you know, what is going on with that?
You guys are great. I'm so glad, all these great questions. So right now, it does not get added to all collaborators' ORCID records, because we need to change our workflow so that we have those people give the DMP tool permission to update their ORCID record. So we don't have a workflow for that right now. We do intend on adding that, but for now, it's just the creator that it's getting added to their ORCID record. It's a little more complicated when you're adding additional people to the record in terms of permissions and authentication. So we wanted to do it kind of the correct ORCID way. So that involves some workflow changes that we need to build out. So for now, it's just the creator, but we do, I think down the road, we'll extend it.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Maria. One more question has come in, which, as it stands now, can the DMP be treated as a living document that would, with all versions shown with the same DOI? So I guess this is getting at, you know, as updates are made to the DMP, is it just keeping the same DOI, or are we creating new DOIs for different versions? How are you approaching that?
Yeah, versioning is a big thorny issue, especially when you're talking about a living document. Right now, we are not minting new DOIs, you know, for every change on a DMP. We are tackling versioning with sort of the larger DMP platform community, like our colleagues in the UK, DMP Online, because how we handle versioning in DMPs is quite complicated, and we need to make sure that all of the platforms have kind of a common approach to it. I don't want to be minting a new DOI for every change, and then DMP Online is doing something different. It would just be messy. So we're taking some time and really just walking through all of the different kind of scenarios and workflows to think about how we could capture the important information about versioning in a clear and concise way. So that is kind of slated for fall for us to like really dig into versioning, but it's an important piece. And especially now that we've got this basic structure, the first step for me was really like structure the DMP and get PIDs in there. And now we've done that kind of like thorny work, and now we're going in and we're making updates. We're connecting with electronic lab notebooks, and we're making these connections with the eventual output. So now that versioning piece is we've got to solve that one. So I think we'll probably be coming out to the community and asking for you know, feedback on that once we've got it kind of more formulated. Nina, did you have something?
And currently the DOI or the DMP ID will take to the most recent version though, right? It doesn't maintain previous revisions.
Right. Yeah. I mean, in our database, we would have all that like stored, but the actual landing, you know, the actual DMP ID and the XML. I don't know, Liz, what on the DataCite side, what that looks like.
On the DataCite side, we have a provenance endpoint that will give you some limited information about what changes were made to the metadata of a DOI over time, even if the DOI itself, you know, isn't versioned. It's somewhat limited, but it will tell you that somebody changed XYZ on whatever date.
These are all great thoughts. I know we only have a few minutes left, so I will just say that if any additional questions or thoughts come up, everyone on this call can feel free to email orcidus@lyrasis.org. That email will reach myself and also Paulo Guhilde, who's on our call, who's our new ORCID US Community Specialist. And you know, if it's something that we can't answer, we will forward it on to, you know, somebody who can. But yeah, we're hoping that this was a kind of a helpful starting point for everybody to hear some of these exciting updates that are happening around data management plans and DOIs and ORCID. You know, with ORCID being one of the main persistent identifiers that researchers really do need to know about, you know, feel free to stay in the loop with our ORCID US community activities, because one of the things we will continue to we'll continue the discussion on is doing that outreach to researchers to make sure they know what ORCID is and get their ORCID ID. But yeah, like I said, we will send a link to this recording out to everybody. We'll get the links to the slides put in the notes document and send that out too. I know there are a lot of like really helpful links in the notes doc, so a lot of materials to look at. But yeah, thanks so much everybody for joining us today. And you know, thanks to our presenters as well. I think this was really interesting for me. I hope it was for everybody else too. Really exciting to hear about the DMP tool, writing DMPs to ORCID and implementing all of the persistent identifiers. So, so thank you so much, everybody. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your day and rest of your week. And with that, I think we can go ahead and conclude. If there are any comments in the chat that we didn't get to, I'll try to follow up with those individuals separately after the call. Well, thanks so much, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks again, Liz, Maria, Nina. See you all next time. All right, bye, everyone.